We're looking at Vice President JD Vance as well, calling out what he's calling rampant fraud across the country. Watch this.
While a lot of Americans can't afford the cost of childcare, they want to take the very programs that we use to make childcare more affordable and give them to fraudsters who are illegally in our country to begin with. These are not politicians who care about you. They care about keeping the fraud going.
So, Brian, now we're talking about the second phase of this fraud story. And I had talked about a little bit last week that California, I thought, was going to be next. And here we are.
Yeah.
You're also seeing an anti-ICE response in California with protesting. It's nothing like what's happening in Minnesota. You would expect it to a certain degree out of that state. It almost seems like the ICE situation is being used to deflect attention away from what is happening with the massive amount of fraud that's being uncovered. And I do think that's a piece of this in Minnesota, because you've got Governor Walz telling people, get out there, be on your cameras, film everything that's happening as these tensions continue to escalate. And there's no walking back of it from the politicians as it's getting worse. In fact, it only feels like they're fueling the fire even more. So I have to sit back and ask myself, why are they doing this? Is it all about ICE? Is it all about Trump? Or is some of this part of Tim Walz trying to kind of be able to step back and say, well, see, yes, we have this over here, but look at how bad this is.
Well, you come to me as the fraud expert because I'm from Minnesota.
And the Minnesota
so I must
expert.
know a lot about fraud. I agree with you. Yes, I'm guaranteed Tim Walz is desperate to have the conversation be about anything other than fraud. So there's no question about that. But I do think it's important, like fraud has to come back front and center in Minnesota. It has to, because it's a theft of taxpayer money there and across the country. And you can't lose sight of it. I mean, the desire to create chaos in Minnesota is the desire to paper over the real problems with fraud, and that can't happen. But I think it's important, and I want to kick it to Taylor, because I love when California can be the center of problems and not Minnesota.
But LA, not her area of California.
Right. No, Merced is a lovely town. Merced is one of the best. Almonds there are fantastic. The budget in California, tell me if I'm wrong, the budget in California is like $350 billion, isn't it? Okay, so when you talk about the possibility of fraud, I mean, Minnesota's budget is a fraction of that. Okay, so this is where there's real possibility. But I just want to say something. I don't know the answer. We talk about California like every day and how messed up it is and how much fraud there is. But can I just say there's a glimmer of hope in California, I think.
Okay.
This guy in San Francisco, Daniel Laurie, the mayor there.
Yeah.
Is he kind of the person who does crack down on some of this stuff? Like maybe is the kind
Daniel Lurie?
Yeah, the Levi's guy.
Yeah.
It strikes me there might be sane Democrats in California that could help with this, Taylor.
I'm hopeful. Of anyone, and he ousted the London Breed, the former mayor, and that was very far left to moderate, and that's a lot to say for San Francisco, which is very far left. So I am most hopeful on him, was in the election. Businesses are coming back to San Francisco, but I am still not sure how this all turns out, Brian. So yes, cautiously optimistic, but I'm not sure he's the answer either. I think you might need a full gut check in California. Okay. I mean, when we think about the unvetting, I was just reading a $23 million homeless scheme in California where they're just handing out money, zero oversight, zero vetting. That is ingrained in big city, LA, San Francisco, big government socialism. No vetting because they think vetting is racist. Vetting is discriminatory. Open borders, helping the poor souls, which we can talk about the emotional aspect of that. That's another day. I just want to look at the economics. That's a full, you need a full washout of that. That is ingrained in that culture.
And every time it happens, we're like shocked that there's, oh my God, government passed out billions of dollars and there's billions of dollars of fraud. You know, it's estimated that somewhere on the order of 5 to 10% of all government spending is fraudulent, and especially with programs like this. And my sense is that it's not the fraud that's the issue. It's the programs themselves. Look, Americans are very charitable. They're very ingenious. If we need a better daycare or cheaper daycare, I think the private market can handle that. But
can we talk about
just
that?
Like PPP, it's always fraud when government starts redistributing income.
I think JD Vance had a very good soundbite in the intro that you read, talking about daycare. That's just something that's top of my mind. No nannies showed up this morning. Daycare's a disaster. Everything's closed. So there are thousands of, not millions of people home with their kids today, working from home, just trying to make ends meet today. But again, and Brian, you know a little bit more than I do on this to be dangerous, but if you pulled out and you want it to be a highly regulated industry, but it's also so highly regulated that you don't have entrance into the market. There are so high barriers to get into this that the cost of the daycare or a childcare, it seems like we haven't found the root cause of this. And if that is something in my budget that we're looking at, and that's also where a lot of this fraud is going to, the Laring Center in Minnesota, I'm sure that they're also in California. That's what I'm talking about, Brian, when you think about like change from the root. Like you got to rip out the full weed, and I'm not sure we're there yet.
Just real quick, Dagan, are you surprised that Governor Gavin Newsom is stepping up his attacks on ICE to deflect from this particular situation?
No, there was some misstatement. I would call them misstatements about the Second Amendment is how I would broadly characterize it,
right.
Involving the man who was killed over the weekend in Minneapolis. That you can carry, he had a concealed carry permit, and you can carry under the Second Amendment your weapon to a protest, period. And it was the phrasing of these statements that was off. Like people in the White House needed kind of a course on the Second Amendment and what is legal and what is acceptable under the Second Amendment. You open carry, conceal carry. I know so many people who have been at protests and had their guns on them. That being said, all of a sudden, Gavin Newsom is trying to act like he is for the Second Amendment and is standing up for the Second Amendment, and which is just absolutely absurd. And Cam Edwards is somebody who lives right near my family in Southern Virginia, who is a Second Amendment not only advocate, but he's also a firearms expert. And he said that one of the cabinet secretaries did make a dumb comment, but Newsom and his ilk in California have made it illegal to carry at a protest or public assembly in California, which proves that they don't believe in the Second Amendment, as if there was any doubt. So they're trying to take every word that is uttered by the people in the Trump administration, in an interview and turn it back on the administration. And I don't think anybody who believes in what the Trump administration is doing should buy into that.